All right, so we're live.
Lauren, are you coordinating this?
No, you can call the meeting to order just like any other meeting.
Oh, we are. Oh, so we are doing. I didn't realize that. I thought this was a separate.
It's an advertised special meeting, so it's going to be run
Oh.
just like the other meetings. Yep.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Sorry. So,
All right.
are we starting it with the Pledge of Allegiance then, as previously?
Ed,
You can call it to order, pledge allegiance, and roll call.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll call the meeting to order, and we can say. You all right, Ed?
Yes, I have to admit Fred on his computer.
Cool, thank you.
There we go.
Okay. I guess we can stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't bring the flag this time. I apologize. I pledge allegiance to the flag of America,
To the
the
republic,
republic for which it stands,
a nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and
justice for all.
for all. Do you know why we're getting that feedback?
I think Fred, that's probably because you need to mute one of your devices, Fred.
I just got the other one turned off. Yep,
Perfect.
that was me.
So roll call, Shannon?
Okay, Jane Flanagan. Felix Raimondo.
Present.
Kyle Elliott. Janine Riley.
Here.
Carol Smith.
Here.
And I believe the only thing on tonight's agenda is a discussion about the capital budget for 2021.
Okay, I just didn't hear if the roll call was finished. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was it? It's done, Shannon? Okay, sorry. There was a lot of noise, so I didn't hear this. So we're just going over to, there's no public comment. We don't going over any minutes. We are here to go over the upcoming budget, correct? Thank you. And should we let Kathy start with that? Lauren, I mean,
I think either Kathy or Fred would be the appropriate. Fred has done, I think, a lot of the background work on the projects that are on the capital budget.
yeah, I'm sorry. I could have sent out an agenda for this. I didn't think.
Yeah. No, and I can take the lead and then start to answer questions.
All right, Fred, I'm going to go on mute.
And we had discussed this at the last authority meeting. We had originally done a budget for 2020 to expedite some projects up so we could do some funding. Had presented that to Plymouth Council, and Plymouth Council had decided that they wanted to adhere to the agreement just for fiscal reasons. So as a result of that, we have an adjusted budget, and we did have a preparation call on this yesterday just to kind of discuss it. And as a result of that preparation call that we had, Ed distributed to everyone a new budget for your consideration and discussion tonight, really for discussion. And the goal really is to have a good board discussion on what we want to include in the capital budget, and understand our exposure with Plymouth, and to be able to then present this back to Plymouth Township. The main change, so in the budget that I presented for the board, basically what I did was, if I made a change or I reduced the number, I put it in red and put a strikeout through it, and if I moved a line item, I included it as a bolded number. The discussion really revolves around, and the agreement with Plymouth is that we can't change the budget by more than $100,000 in the next coming 3 years.
Fred, excuse me, I got a question.
Go
The
ahead.
agreement that you're referring to, that the agreement of the original authority agreement, or is it the 2017 agreement that was circulated?
The 2017, the February 28th, 2017 agreement.
So I think we need clarification on that. What you're saying, that Plymouth rejected our original budget, our original capital budget, because of the 2017 agreement.
That is my
Is that
understanding. And I'll leave Lauren and Mike kind of answer that. But yes, that's my understanding. That we actually
And
met
what-
with Karen and Chris Lasciavo, and then they took it in front of Borough Council. And then the information that came back was that they, Plymouth Township, wanted to adhere to the agreement and did not want to accept the terms.
And what is the terms of that agreement, if we can get clarity on that? Lauren?
Sorry. Sure. So the agreement that we put together was negotiated with Plymouth back in 2017 and had to do with the capacity that Plymouth had purchased, particularly with regard to the Tornetta properties. And at the time, we were also doing the odor control project, the RBC, and the interceptor project, which we're just finishing up now. Because of the cost of those projects, Plymouth wanted to, we were taking out financing, so Plymouth wasn't sure at the time whether they were going to piggyback onto the authority's financing or make payments. Ultimately, they decided to make payments, and there's an annual reconciliation in that. And part of the agreement has the authority putting together a 5-year capital plan. And I believe we actually put together a 10-year capital plan every year since we've done this agreement. And essentially what it states is that for the 5-year capital plan, the upcoming 3 years are what Plymouth is using to do their planning. So it allows the authority to make changes if there's an emergency, obviously, or if there's a project that's less than $100,000. But inside that 3-year plan, they're not supposed to be changed. So what Fred is referencing is that there was a meeting with the township where the authority had proposed shifting around some of the capital projects that were planned over the next several years in order to take advantage of financing that's available right now. And Plymouth was not interested in doing that.
And so is there concern with moving projects around, or the money associated with the projects? So if we stay within the budgeted amount that we had listed on the project, but maybe shift 1 or 2 items, is that their problem, or is the problem the money associated with that?
So that scenario has not been presented to Plymouth yet, and that was one of the things that Fred wanted to discuss tonight, because he has some ideas about shifting some of the projects that would allow us to reapproach Plymouth with that question
And
how they're
do
interpreting
they
me.
have the ability to tell us what project we can do and can't do based on what we submitted, or is it we can't go above the $100,000?
They don't have the ability to tell us what projects we can and cannot do. What the question is, what they're going to be on the hook for as far as their percentage of the projects and when. So
But the
that's
money
really
thing.
what was that?
The money. It's a money
Right.
issue,
Right.
not a project issue. Like, they
I don't
care
think
if
that
we move
there's. I don't think that there's any issue with the project. In fact, if you look at the last document that Fred circulated around, their auditor, Rick Orloff, agrees that this a belt filter press needs to be replaced. And that's the project, the main project Fred wanted to do.
Yeah, I'm glad Fred sent that out. Yeah, it's not a project issue. It's they have their township to run.
So the question I have is Plymouth still on the $400,000 payment program right now?
They are. So that was a 5-year program, and it started in 2017. We were actually able to get such significant grants for the interceptor project. So the way that the payment, just backing up, the way that it worked was they made an upfront payment of $400,000, and then there was a reconciliation either way for each calendar year. So so the year we did the odor control project, they actually wrote a check to the authority to cover that balance. So last year with the Interceptor project, we received such a large grant that we ended up paying pennies to the dollar, and then Plymouth paid 26% of those pennies to the dollar. So they actually paid, they ultimately, I think, reconciled back to Plymouth. They got a large refund for those projects.
So the 2017 agreement is financially closed? Like they're caught up?
No, the Interceptor, Fred, I don't know. Have we done final payments for the Interceptor project? Fred, you're muted. Fred, you're on mute.
You're
Fred, we
muted,
cannot
Fred.
hear you. He's unmuted. There you go.
Sorry. There is one more, I believe, that's covered by a grant that is in there that we've been working with SEPTA to get the access and the easements across. That's the last remaining item that was covered under those budgets. But I think right now, they've caught, if the answer to the question is I read Rick Orloff's report. They have paid for everything that we have submitted and actually overpaid, so we gave them money back. The last remaining project that would be in there would be the, well, I guess it would cover up through projects through the last approved 2020 budget. So it would cover up projects through this year, through 2021, which includes the electrical substation at 575. And that includes their cost, well, that's only 162,000. But that is included. So if you reference the 2020 budget that we got approved in 2019, it should include up through those projects. But I mean, you got to tell me what the agreement says. Would that be my understanding of that agreement? That anything that I had during those 5 years on an approved budget, that $400,000 could be used to pay for, to equalize the payment. So if it was more than 400,000 one year, it transferred to the next year, was my understanding of it.
I think that's how it's functioned. Yeah, the $400,000 was really kind of their guesstimated payments towards those 3 projects that were identified because they were big ticket items. But I think that it has functioned that they've used those funds to cover their portions of other capital projects as the time has gone along.
So why did they cancel or reject the original budget? Because of the difference in money?
Yes.
And how much of a difference?
Well, it was pretty significant because we basically pushed up the belt filter press, and what we did was we consolidated all of our projects that we were going to do basically over 6 years. We consolidated them all into 3 years so that we will be eligible for a loan amount. So it did go up. I mean, from a total project of what was last approved in the 2020 budget of approximately $1 million, it would have gone up to $6 million, over $6 million. Because what we wanted to do is take advantage of the low interest rates now, and instead of doing, it's the same amount of money that we would have paid for over basically a 5-year period, we consolidated into 3 years. So we didn't add any new projects. And if anything, we actually reduced our overall budget to them. But what we did was we consolidated basically 5 years of projects into 3 years.
So we went over that $400,000.
Yes, their share of it would have been over, and the offer to them was that they could participate with us in a loan, or we could distribute those costs, differently. and we were open to a positive negotiation with them or working through it. They, at a staff level, agreed with the projects and agreed with the logic. But when it went to Borough Council, it came back that they wanted to be in strict accordance with the agreement. And Ed, you can, correct me where I'm wrong. You had the conversation directly with Karen, but that's my understanding of that conversation.
Exactly. That's the way I read it.
Do we want to go through the current proposal or the current draft, not proposal, current draft that I have, discuss that and come back to this issue of how we approach Plymouth on it, and how it impacts the agreement and how we deal with the existing agreement in light of this?
Yeah, please, Fred. I know that you had come up with some scenarios which I think are interesting and useful.
No. So basically what I did to try to keep it as cost neutral between the approved 2020 budget and this budget was I moved the electrical substation upgrades. I actually moved them from a 2021 and 2022 budget all the way back to 2027 and 2028. And I'll explain why. And then I moved the belt filter press replacement from being a 2028 budget of 2.1 million to a design engineering bidding in 2021 of 75,000 or 7.5% of the construction. And in 2022, the actual installation of a screw press, or what we've been calling a centrifuge. The net result of that is that in 2021, I am actually exactly the same amount of money as is in was allocated for that budget year. And then in 2022, we shifted out, and we are actually, what was approved in the budget was $621,000. Our actual cost would be $1,046,000. So it's a difference of approximately $400,000. And in that $400,000, Plymouth would be responsible for, I know this number, but $104,000 of additional things. So if they wanted to strictly comply with their agreement, they could defer that payment of the additional $104,000 until 2023. And in 2023, I have the same exact amount of money that's due, but we would have to adjust it up, or they pay it in 2024. The danger of that is that you're significantly pushing out the electrical substation upgrade. And that was being pushed out primarily because once we actually got real prices in on it, it was higher than Stephen and I's estimate of 575. That was really to replace it, but not do it right. That was to replace equipment, but not to really do it right. Connect both things in so we have 100% redundancy on that. And that's an issue of the parts are getting older. We're at 90% of the design life of that equipment, and replacement parts are getting harder to come by. Not that they aren't available, but getting significantly harder to come by. So we pushed that out. And the only reason that I pushed that out that far was that I didn't want to push out the replacement of the RBCs because I wanted to keep that on a schedule, because that's on a rotating schedule between all three. And if I delayed that again, then I would throw that overall schedule off. I also wanted to work with Plymouth and didn't want to just slam everything into years 4 and 5. I wanted to be cognizant of them as a partner. So that's the primary change. The only other thing that I did was I slid the rehabilitation of the Interceptor up 1 year just to try to even out the payments that Plymouth Township would owe us and that they could provide. So
Fred, can you give Jane an explanation why the RBCs are spread out the way they are, and what we were doing for boards in the future when we did that, when we did it that way?
Felix, can I jump in before we give an explanation? I just had a couple of questions for Fred regarding what we're talking about, and maybe my questions are way too basic. I guess my first question / comment is, I thought that the electrical substation upgrade was important for the reason, Fred, that you just mentioned. I remember us discussing that it's, getting older, parts are more difficult to come by, and that, in order to actually have a backup and all of the important things that we need. So I guess I'm fine. I guess I'm just questioning whether it should be out to 2028, but we can discuss that. My other question, and like I said, this may be completely way basic, but and maybe Kathy, this is something for you as well. Is the authority in a position where we can do what we want to do and pay for it, and then just collect the money from Plymouth over the 10-year, like the way we normally do, like just kind of have them owe us? I mean, like I said, maybe this is way too basic, but is that possible?
No, we had spoken about that yesterday during our initial meeting of whether we do this work now because it's necessary, and then pass it to them down the lane in terms of their capital share. There are significant connection fees that we have received, and I know that those are restricted as to their use. But we certainly have the cash flow right now to be able to fund it. But what precipitated all this was Felix had brought up at the June meeting, interest rates being so historically low at perhaps 1%, that, this would be the cheapest money we'd ever be able to have to be able to do this infrastructure that is much needed.
Just to clarify very quickly, so there's no confusion, Kathy's a great accountant. She's not a municipal authority solicitor. We can use tapping fee money for this sort of project. So all of that tapping fee money that's coming in can be used for these projects because they're improvements to the system.
Okay.
Gene, to answer your.
I'm sorry, Fred, but we do have a number of tapping fees projected to come in. I know Ed has that number, but with Matson Mill and the other thing down to SEPTA, just for people's clarification.
Yeah, Matson Mill, 51 Washington, and Sora West are all in progress.
And we have in a bank account right now over $1 million of previous fees that have been collected.
Yeah, and we should have gotten, but guess I'm not going to answer Jeannie's question without her there.
That litter box issue.
All right.
I had to bring my cat in. My cat had to come in.
She's having issues going in the litter box with her poo. Excuse me, this is way too much information, and I saw her circling, so I shoved her in. I apologize.
So Shannon just corrected me. We have $2 million in an account representing tapping fees.
Yeah, because I think we should have just got like 1.6 million from 51 Washington in there, and then we have the second payment from Sora West coming in, hopefully by the end of the year, and then Matson Mill whenever it goes to closing. But Janine, to answer your question, the reason that we push the electric back is I view the sludge process as a higher priority. Am I comfortable pushing it back that far? No. And then I'll answer Felix's question, is that, that is, our electric is very important, but it's a large expenditure, and I was trying to even it out, which plays into Felix's question as to, we have the RBCs set up that we do one approximately every 10 years or so. So that way, it's actually less than 10 years. But that way they're on a schedule. So that way no future board, they don't have to replace two of them at the same time or all three of them. we're trying to get a age difference between them so they wear out at regular intervals so we can properly budget for that. Because the tapping fees may not be, a opportunity that we'll have in the future to do this. So we'd have to do bank loans potentially on it, and we'd be set up so that either we've reserved the capital in our place or that we would have RBC 1 paid off before we take a loan at RBC 2 and before we take an RBC 3, almost like a car payment. You want to have it paid off before it wears out. So that's the reason that we've done that. And where Felix was going on that was that if I were to have jostled that number around by more than a few years, I would screw up that for future boards. With that said, to answer Janine's question more fully, the RBCs can be pushed back. We're not even using that third RBC. We're only using 2 of the 3. And I consider the reliability of our electrical substations, not only due to age, but replacement of parts, and the fact that it doesn't service the entire plant, a major issue. But it was a Sophie's choice. How do you do this and spread the money out that you're a good partner with Plymouth, but you aren't putting the authority in jeopardy? Because the electrical substations would be a very large emergency job and would be extremely expensive as an emergency job. Just because, it's a big thing, and that's not one that you want to do as an emergency. But I can't tell you that it's a safety issue or reliability. I can still get parts. I just know that when you get to that age with that equipment, it's like a car. Once that car is 10 years old, it's going to break down. It's just a matter of when. And do some of them last more than 10 years? Absolutely. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Go ahead, Carol. I'll jump in after you.
Well, I just wanted this noted for everyone. What was the change in the cost from what we originally estimated for the electrical to, because we found out about its age and we wanted a complete overhaul? What was the updated cost?
The updated cost, which is very conservative, is $1.3 million. The original estimate that was put in there was $575,000. $575,000, where how Stephen and I did this, was basically to replace the equipment. But what it didn't include, because we didn't go through a full conceptual design with electrical engineer, was completely having redundancy so that we can service the entire plant through either side. We also didn't have in there that while we're doing this construction, that we have temporary generators in there. Because when you take one down and replace it, it has to go in the same physical spot. So without redundant generators brought out to the site, if we lost one of our electrical services, we'd have no electrical power for the entire plant. And if you were to get a major power outage for a few weeks, not that we get that in our area, but if you had it for a week, we'd be not processing sewage for a week. So we have large, almost a tractor trailer size emergency generator brought in. And my electrical engineer I told him it might be a few years. So he was very conservative because he hasn't done a design. So maybe it's a little bit less than that, but the 575 would have just replaced the existing equipment that was there and would not have been the upgrade and brought us into the future like it should be.
All right, I'm going to jump back in for a second, and I'm looking at Plymouth's contribution, the capital contribution. I just kind of summed up the bottom. Over 10 years, they're contributing $2 million, right? That's what we're asking them to contribute, $2,023,000. Now, they give us $400,000, which not only goes toward the capital projects, but other things. Am I correct?
I think it's just capital projects, at least.
So if they're giving us $400,000,
the 400,000 is solely capital.
Is solely capital.
Solely capital.
So I guess let me back up. I'm confused. If we're saying they're giving us $400,000 a year, right, for capital projects, and over the course of 10 years, we're looking at them giving, $2 million, right? 400,000 times 10 is $4 million, right?
So the $400,000 was only for 5 years, and that was related to the 3 specific projects: the odor control, the the one RBC replacement and the interceptor project that we're wrapping up now. So that stops.
That stops here. I guess I'm still going back to if we are in, I guess one, I'm still concerned about the electrical substation. That still is, I think that's still important and probably should be addressed before we need to address it. But I guess I'm still kind of at the point where if the authority is in a good financial position and we can borrow this money, and we're also in a position to be able to pay it, and I don't want to say really don't need to worry about the 26% that Plymouth has to kick in. I mean, they will eventually catch up, right? Why don't I still am just thinking, why don't we just do what we want to do and then let them, if they want, we can structure it so they can give us maybe a little bit more. We can, give them a install. I don't know. I'm not. I understand their 26% contribution, but to me, it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. If we can afford it, we're driving the bus. They're using our systems. We're just asking them for 26%. It's a quarter of the cost. I just am still confused why we're letting them dictate what we do if we can afford to do it on our own.
Janine, if I can jump in, I don't think we're letting them dictate.
No,
I think we, Fred pointed out that it would be a good idea with how cheap money is right now, and the fact that the authority is kind of flush, that maybe we should do some of these projects right now. The question is, since Plymouth under the 2017 agreement only has to pay for capital projects that I think, what is it, like 3 years, Fred? We give them a 3-year rolling capital projects.
That's correct.
Yeah, that they're just saying we're going to pay for that which is in this 3-year, and that you want to accelerate it. They're not. I also think that if you do want to go in that direction, if you do want to authorize Fred to start moving forward with some of these projects, it's a good idea to talk to Plymouth and say, hey, if we do projects that were scheduled for year 4 or year 5 or year 6, and we're not going to bill you until year 4 or 5 or year 6, will you still be willing to pay for it? And see what they say. I'm sure one of the things that they'll be concerned about is, well, we don't want year 6 to be $11 million worth of projects. So, they may want to make sure that it's flattened in some way. But that's what I think we discussed yesterday. And I think that's kind of the best way to go, is to say, will you be willing to do that?
I would be more inclined, I think, to go that route and take care of the things that we as an authority feel that we need to take care of, and kind of figure out their contribution piece however we figure it out with them.
Yeah. We probably need to have that documented in an agreement, obviously, just to make sure that we're not at risk with our ratepayers' money, even though we have it. And I'm not saying that we still wouldn't do it, but just so that we're a good partner with Plymouth, and that basically the same deal that we did with them in, I don't even think you have to go out over the 10 years. I think you could probably look at it over 5 years and basically duplicate and maybe improve upon the 2017 agreement, but just basically look at that, because it's the same basic reasoning.
It's cheap. I mean, and to me, if we level off their payments, or if we do something in year 2 and we don't make them pay for it until year 5, I mean, I'm going to say it's kind of like an interest-free loan to a certain extent to them. I mean, I don't see why you would disagree with that, saying we're going to bear the cost. You just need to, pay us what you had agreed to pay us in year 4 or 5, what you had agreed to pay us in year 4 or 5.
No, that makes sense, Janine, and I think, Fred, you kind of approached it that way. But I'm anxious again in talking over in terms of the plant, getting rid of the belt filter press and getting to that screw centrifuge, because that, again, more reliable instrument and will save us sludge costs. And I also agree with you. I know why, Fred, we did discuss this, putting out the electrical, but putting it out that far, I agree with you as well, Janine. It's a bit of a concern.
I just would, Ed, would you be able, and I don't know if you have it at your fingertips or not, do we have the old budget? What we want, I guess our proposed, what we really want, like I guess what I'll call our goal budget?
Yeah, well, yeah, Janine, when we sent this out, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if you look at the attachments that Ed sent, it's a PDF, and I think I named
Oh,
it Plymouth
rejected. Sorry,
Rejected.
it was a +2. It was a +2. Only 3 showed up. Now I have to flip it. But okay, sorry, I got it. I just
Yep, so there's a Plymouth Rejected, there is the 2020 approved, which is approved, and then there was the Excel spreadsheet, which was the current one.
that's what I yes, that's what I was.
And
I'm sorry, that's what I was looking at.
yeah, a point
My
to
apologies.
make on this is even with the increase in the electrical, we are actually down from the 2020 approved budget because the belt filter press went from 2.1 million to basically 1,075,000. And the other one only increased by like 700,000. So we're net down $300,000 or $400,000.
Can I jump in here for a second too? I got a comment and a question, and I'm going to piggyback off what Janine expressed. Is that putting the electrical 7 years out, not to be executed in the 8th year? I think that that's not a wise choice because, you know, the way that the climate's going, you know, we could have a hurricane any minute that decides it's going to park above Conshohocken and dump, you know. Anyway, there's so much at risk at that I think that it'd be wiser to move that forward and put it between the centrifuge and the RBC and, you know, put a financial package together that we can move forward with and also provides Plymouth with some stable financial contributions that they can budget into their budget. So that's what I'm looking for in this capital budget building process. So I say we modify what we got, try to capture what the board has expressed, and then bring it back to Plymouth with a financial plan. Is that something that we can do before the end of the year?
Fred, I believe you have that underway with some of those scenarios because we did discuss this.
Yeah, I think we have an obligation to get this approved technically by November 1st, but I wouldn't say the end of the year. I would say, I don't know if the end of the month will happen, but by December that we could get back and have them. I don't know when their next authority or, council meeting is, but I'd like to get a plan back to them. I don't think it will take long to put together a plan that we as a board agree on, and then a offer to them of how it could be paid over time.
Yeah, and
If they agree to,
as we discussed, Fred, too, once we get that together, they don't have to have a borough meeting. We can meet with them to discuss this prior to this because it would be good to get feedback from them.
you definitely want to go ahead.
Well, that was something that we had mentioned. I mean, I think this is, I think this can be worked out. We know the people, and I think the board has discussed in terms of projects, the electrical. I think we're all concerned about the date, and we feel that needs to be moved up. I concur with that. So
Kathy, can if Fred does the engineering and some budget numbers, can you put a financial plan together?
I think so. Yeah. Shannon and Ed are already working on the budget for next year, and we would just have to look at which projects and drop them in those particular lines.
Well, but
so this is like a 5-year financial plan.
Right.
Okay. All right.
my question is, would the board still want to basically go out for a borrowing? Because if we go out for a borrowing, I think what I have and what I identified as the Plymouth Rejected would be the plan if we're going to go out for a major borrowing. If we're going to pay for it cash out of pocket, then we could do a modified on the Excel spreadsheet, basically to bring this back in, and maybe we do the borrowing in 2021 or 2022, So that would extend kind of, out or 2022. But the problem is we don't know what the interest rates are going to be at
Right.
that point. So I guess my question is, does the board want to do a borrowing and slide it all into 3 years? Because Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to spend the money in 3 years from the time we close on the loan.
Well, it's based on those ramifications. So whatever those guidelines are under the revenue note or the bond is when we would need to spend it. Now, in the last revenue note, we were able to extend that period. I just don't know, and Chris Gibbons had to jump through a couple of hoops to
Yes.
get that
Yeah,
reinstated.
I'm gonna jump in here again.
Yeah, please.
We have to reasonably expect to spend all the money in 3 years,
Right.
or else we are subject to arbitrage provisions at that point in time, and we can't do it. We don't have to spend all of it within 3 years, but we have to reasonably expect to spend it in 3 years. If it goes 3.5, maybe close to 4, but there's a reason why we're okay. But it's got to be within 3 years of the borrowing. That's why sometimes bank loans are a little bit more with a drawdown are a little bit more preferred because you're only taking the money out as you need it. But those are options that you can discuss with your financial advisor, and they can put something together.
Well, I would be fine with borrowing the money and expediting all the projects because each one seems critical to efficiency and serving our public. So I would be fine with that.
I agree. I agree with Jane, and I'm fine with the concept of borrowing. With one caveat, Kathy, unless you said, Janine or board, this is a terrible idea. You're not in financial shape to do this. Don't do it.
So I had reached out, Chris Gibbons had reached out to me the other day about another client that I have. The interest rates are under 2%. I mean, that's hard to use your own money when you can get something in the one to borrow this money. It's never going to be cheaper.
Thank you, Kathy. Kathy had gotten it. I mean, it is an extraordinary time. And again, I think it's a good idea to go forward with it that way. Again, I would like to move up hearing everyone's comments.
The one thing I'd ask direction on, because I think with the borrowing, what we had proposed and I identified as the Plymouth rejected makes the most sense, because to do a borrowing and not include the RBCs, I don't think makes sense, because that's a $3.3 million expenditure. I'd like to see that into a borrowing as cheap as this money is, and then just defer that out for the 3.5, to be the end of the 3.5 years. It screws my schedule basically by, 1 to 2 years, but on a 10-year schedule, that's not as critical given the opportunity. But I would throw that out for board discussion as to, do they want to include the RBCs in the borrowing, or do they not want to include it in the borrowing? So it will be the difference of, option one would be just moving my current budget, moving the electrical up and keeping the RBC, and moving the electrical up to being basically a 2021, 2022, or 2023 in there, and then, but keeping the RBCs in 25, or going completely with what I call the Plymouth rejected budget, moving everything up, and having a $6+ million borrowing, $6.5 million borrowing.
Fred, I have, I guess, two questions on that. The first is going to the RBC piece.
Yep.
So originally in the rejected budget, it was originally scheduled for 2025, which is now where we have it in the revised budget. But in the rejected budget, we moved it up to 2023. Is that still in line with your desire to space? Is the 2023 date still in line with your desire to space out the RBC replacement? Does that make?
Yeah, because they basically have a life of almost 30 years. So I'm trying to get 10 years between them. So, and if I push that job to the end of 2023, I'm really only off by 18 months. I don't think it's that critical, in those, and hopefully the newer ones last longer. But I want to stay as close to that. It's just a matter of taking advantage of finance.
Okay, so but it still is, it's
Yeah.
helpful. It's still in line with what our overall goal is.
Yes, it's near the end of its life and it keeps my
And again, who
rotation
knows
in
if we're going
line.
to be able to borrow that money at the rate that we would be getting now in however many years. So in that regard, I'm fine to include the RBC. I guess my other question, and we may have said this, and I'm sorry, I'm just forgetting, with the belt filter press, because I agree, Carol, I think that's important to kind of get, that replaced. Why was it 2.1 in 2028 and only 1 now?
Okay, the answer for that is originally we had budgeted to replace a belt filter press, and instead we're changing technology to a screw press. The cost of the screw press is actually only $270,000. So what I'm budgeting in there is to put 2 screw presses in, so I have redundancy. So I'm not in a position where every time it breaks, I'm liquid hauling. The other thing is we've also redoing the building because of the attack of the gases. So I'm addressing that and putting that in. And I had a concept that we discussed at the meeting yesterday. Well, I can only put one of the 2 in. I think we should do it right. If we're going to do it, let's do it right the first time.
I have no problem with that. I think, we thankfully are very financially sound, and I think through all of our actions over the last number of years, we've gotten into this position where, not to say we can take advantage and kind of the silver lining that maybe COVID has presented. I try to look for them wherever I can. And if due to our, good management and financial responsibility, we're able to borrow money and kind of go for our wish list, just given the situation that has presented itself over this past year, my feeling is let's do it. Let's get what we need to get and do it right the way we want to do it. And, like I said, advise Plymouth and we'll figure that piece out.
There's nothing, I agree with you, Janine. There's nothing frivolous. I mean, it's a wish list, but it's in the extent, again, I want to get rid of the Demon belt filter press from Siemens that, has caused increased sludge costs and will have increased maintenance costs, and getting the redundant screw press will be beneficial for us. We'll have that redundancy built in for a cheaper price than another belt filter press. And what will that provide? One of them's down, we don't have to sludge haul, we use the other one. So to me, that's a tremendous benefit.
And I also think the timing is great because we do have all the big construction projects right now. So we are getting this cash inflow, which we might never see again. So at this point, we could maximize that along with the low interest rate. I think it's the time to do these big projects.
I agree. And, keep in mind too, when 51 goes up and Matson Mills, we will be getting, hopefully those apartments will be filled and, we'll have happy customers from there too.
Right.
So I guess the next steps, would it be for us? I mean, does the board like what I call the Plymouth rejected budget? And for us really to work with Kathy and come up with a financial plan that the board can consider at the upcoming authority meeting, give Plymouth a highlight or at least an idea of what we're going to do, so that way they're at least kept in the loop, at least just giving Karen that we're going to work with something and bring it back to them. I guess my question is, I don't know how we go back to Plymouth after they just rejected it. How do we explain the change other than saying, hey, because we offered in general terms, these payment plans and things like that, no specific plan, just a general, hey, listen, we're open to options. How do we approach Plymouth again to get a different answer this time than we got last time?
I guess my question is, do we need a different answer? I mean, we're doing
Yeah, I think that's Yeah.
we're doing what we're doing, and then we will present, to them something that's evened out over however, whatever, whatever it is. I mean,
What I'd want to have them do is have them commit that even though we're going to expedite these, they're going to pay for them when they would have occurred in the past budget. Because they could take the stance of, hey, you weren't allowed to change it. I don't know that they will. You weren't allowed to change it. And now you have no more capital budgets. So we're not paying our fair share of it. We're just paying what the agreement said.
well, I would, my point would be, we will honor the budget that the 10-year, capital budget that you approve, if that's what makes financial sense, but like that we would honor that. And again, if the authority, if can financially handle it and not make any changes to that and say, we'll honor it. If you honor it, we're taking advantage of these things. We know you rejected this, but we feel this is important. We're in a position where we can kind of carry you. You're welcome. And, we'll honor what we originally said. Is that, am I really oversimplifying this?
I like to hear Mike and Lauren talk about it.
No,
just
no,
to see
Janine,
how do we cover our
Janine,
costs.
I don't think you're oversimplifying it. You came on the board at a time when the historically bad relationship between us and Plymouth was improving a little bit. That 2017 agreement is really in many ways is an example of we decided to try to get rid of a lot of the nonsense of the past, and we decided to try to clean some things up, because the original agreements from 30 years ago were just they were garbage. So this was an attempt to do that. I think, again, for Jane's perspective, who's back in 2010, 2011, 2012, we were fighting with Plymouth constantly over every issue, and they were questioning everything we were doing. And Rick Orloff was coming in every year and claiming everything was a hot mess. So I think the relationship is a lot better right now. And I think the proposal that you guys have discussed tonight, just sort of discussing it with Plymouth and then just getting some feedback from them about what they think about it, because I don't think you're oversimplifying it. If they were going to pay us $10 million over 5 years or 10 years, round numbers, and if they're only going to pay us $10 million over 10 years, really, what difference should it make when we do the projects? It's a matter of, the timing should be the same. So I just think we approach them with it. I don't think we need any great strategy or whatever, and I think we can just go and talk to them about what our thoughts are. And if I can say one other thing too, if the Plymouth meetings are public and they're televised, because of the pandemic and because of the mall, Plymouth tax revenues are down. They talk about it every meeting, every month. Their tax revenues are significantly down. I'm not telling you any tales out of school here. So I don't think this rejection is sort of them not being cooperative. I think it's a matter of whether or not they have the money.
Well, there's two parts to that, Mike, and I just wanted to follow up with that. Yeah, Rick Orloff was very aggressive pursuing every question in our budgets because, quite honestly, they were a mess, and we made big strides in rectifying that. And in the 2017 agreement was a result of us coming together with Dean and making it work. And so that was the result of that agreement. And as far as Plymouth not having the money, I understand that. And listen, it is some tough days. And they decided to structure their sewer billing the way they did. And I know that they have some legacy issues with that. And it's a burden that they got, but that's not my burden. But I completely understand. And we're going to be good partners with Plymouth and work with them to meet their needs and do what we need to do on our side. So if there's it seems like we have consensus on restructuring having Fred go back, move some items around, and Kathy work on a financial plan. Is that where we're at right now in this meeting? I'm asking
Yes.
the board members.
Yes, that's what I was getting to. I was going to poll the board members and ask if we go forward. Fred, you're going to have to work with Kathy on this. So we don't need an official roll call vote, do we, Mike?
No, you're just
Lauren, I'm
directing
sorry.
your professionals.
You're not
No,
taking
you're just-
official
you're just-
action.
So I believe all board members are aligned with what we've gone through this evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we will ask Kathy and Fred to move forward with the items as we discussed. And I would like to get that, obviously everybody's, but it'd be nice to get something to Plymouth, because we are going to make them aware of this. I would be nice to get it by the end of November. Is that possible, Fred?
I didn't hear you. You faced out when you gave the deadline.
Did I? I'm sorry. No, I just, the board has concurred to go forward, Fred, and meet with Kathy, and I'd like to get something revised into Plymouth by the end of November, if that's possible.
I mean, I think my analysis is pretty well done because I don't think it's changing much from the Plymouth rejected analysis. And I think it will be a matter of Kathy basically.
Kathy's going to have to reach out and Kathy?
Yeah, and
No,
then we
I'm
bring.
fine. I'm fine. I mean, I have enough to work with Fred to move forward to see from a cash flow point of view what we're going to need.
Great, because he's been in
I'm
touch
sorry,
with
I got to
Chris.
excuse myself on the meeting, guys. Everyone have a good evening. All right, bye-bye.
Okay,
No,
good night. This is weird.
But I mean, do you guys, if you could pull up that Plymouth rejected, do you guys have any real comments or concerns about that? I mean, I don't know that, not that I can't shift it 1 or 2 years, but I think that's pretty much what we're going to be looking at.
And I'm fine with it, Fred. I have no comments.
I mean,
I'm fine with it too, Fred.
okay. Yeah, I think it gets everything done and you know, and you can move the interceptor back. Why would I not? Because I'll probably get, not knock on wood, hopefully get a grant for that.
Right,
Which will also-
exactly.
And that way our interceptors are all done. I don't
Which is-
like pushing I&I back. If we're gonna be proactive, let's be proactive. I like it.
I agree. I would like to get the interceptor done as well. I think that's a real crown of an achievement. So,
You know, I mean, I think with this, Kathy could do it, and then we discuss it at our October board meeting, and then get something out even beginning of November to Plymouth, so that way they can review it. Maybe I don't know how much of a meeting. I think we have to give them the financial plan and the terms that we'd ask them to pay it back over, and then we figure out how you tie that up, either in an agreement or whatever we do. I mean, I defer to Mike and Lauren on kind of how do we document it once we got to deal with their council.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
That'll be the not to be a smart guy, Fred, but that'll be the least of our issues. Once we get
say
an agreement on everything, we'll be able to memorialize it pretty easily.
that's a lawyer's answer.
It certainly is.
I mean,
Damn
do
you
we-
lawyers!
I mean, and I guess I don't know if Kathy needs some guidance on the proposal that she'll help. Kathy and I will work together to craft the Plymouth. You know, do we want to look at basically like even out payments over like 5 or 7 years, something like that in there. That way that, you know, that we're not paying, if you just took basically to use Janine's math, if it's $2 million over 10 years, they basically, maybe they pay us back a little bit extra, no more than $300,000 a year, something like that. I mean, Kathy, what guidance do you need to craft a payment back from a cash flow? What direction you want from the board?
I think I have a couple spreadsheets from you, so I think you and I just need to talk. The authority has previously used, would you the same investment advisor being using Concord, because I would like to get some of Chris's range of interest rates to see from a cash flow point of view what that's going to look like. So I probably would reach out to him in terms of what financing is available, and then we can kind of take it from there from a cash flow.
I believe that's appropriate, is it not, Lauren, or do we need a board directive on that?
So they have not been engaged for this borrowing, but we're really in the infancy stage. You can certainly reach out to Chris. I know that he had some preliminary conversations, I think with Stephen at one point. So Shannon, I think,
All right.
pretty aware that this is.
Figure out
Kathy
what
has
that
recently,
financing
too,
looks
so
like.
That would be terrific.
Now, other item that I wanted to ask you guys, it's been a while since you've had a rate study. So, and I didn't know any projection in COVID world, what is going to happen in terms of residential customers, commercial customers. That certainly would impact cash flow, unless you're thinking that you're just going to balance the budget like you're going into this budget now.
So the authority passed a 3-year rate freeze last summer, so we are in the middle of that.
Okay. So we can pretty much use our revenues that they are currently, with the projection of the cash of any of the connection fees or tapping fees that are going to come in.
Right.
And the additional sewer rental fees, because it's pretty significant with 51 Washington. I think that one we could probably expect. I never like to count a customer until they're actually connected. I would not use Matson Mill, and that goes against my normal advice, but I think it would be pretty realistic because of the steel's going up in the air. So I can't imagine, Jane, if you know something that I don't know, that they would ever not connect, in there. And I think Sora West flows are there.
Right. Everything looks good for them.
Yeah.
I think Sora West, we got an email from the borough today that they have submitted their revised plans, and I think they're going to planning in November and in front of council in December. So they're moving along. I don't think that there's anything else. I don't.
That we need, unless the board has
So-
anything else for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe if there's any other questions, we just call this meeting to an end. Is there any other formal thing that we have to do?
Nope, there is no other action items this evening.
All right, I voted today.
Good.
I went down to 225 Washington Street. There were 2 people there. It was, I felt very secure. It was nice. So anyway, thank you, everybody.
Well, I think we need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, do I hear a motion to, see, that's what I meant. Do I need to, thank
Sorry.
you. Do I need can I hear a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make that motion.
Janine, can you second that?
And second it.
Thank you. All right, that's it, correct?
All right.
All in favor?
Drive you safe.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
We have to
Thank
take,
you.
we have to take a roll call, don't we? Because it's on video.
Yes.
All right, see, this is what I meant.
Jane Flanagan,
Yes.
Janine Riley,
Yes.
Carol Smith,
Yes, this is, I thought we had to do this, is what I meant, so. All right, everybody, I hope you have
Now we're adjourned.
a good evening.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you, guys. It was really helpful.
Thank
All right.
you.
I'm gonna
Thank
go
you. Good
watch
night.
Have a good night, all.
All right.
Hollywood
Kathy, have
right
fun.
now.
Ah.